Hey everyone, where are my Texas folks? So I was 17 years old, applying for college, determining where my future would lead me, and I sat down with my school counselor. We discussed my application materials, transcript, and all you would think would be in a 5-10-minute conversation, since that's all the counselor-student ratio would allow for in our school. Sure, you feel the same. And in that conversation, envisioning how to express my entire self on a paper application, or digital in my case, my counselor was curious about my pursuit of justice through advocacy. Around that time, my school district in Katy, Texas began pulling books off school library shelves. And for as long as I can remember, blocked LGBTQ websites with an internet filter, even sources like the Trevor Project Suicide Prevention Lifeline. When queer students like me tried to access such websites at school, we'd see a message that indicated the school district did not support us for who we were. Disheartened, I decided that I couldn't stand on the sidelines while school board meetings became a hostile environment targeting our education. I signed up to speak and walked into the school board room that Monday night when I could have been spending time with my family, doing homework, or really finishing my college applications. I think that's what my classmates were doing because I was the only student in the room. I sat alone. My eyes wandered the room to soak in the atmosphere. It was a bit eerie and I felt cold. And the brief, peaceful moment I had was broken when the first speaker was called to the lectern, and then the next, and the next, and they were all speaking about what they called inappropriate content in our school libraries, merely for featuring a Black or gay protagonist. We've all heard about book bans. There is a concerted political effort to erase marginalized people from the narrative, weaponizing fear and ignorance. You may have heard politicians reading passages out of context to push agenda, like Senator Kennedy tussled with me in a now viral social media clip from when I testified before the US Senate. If you're sitting here wondering about the dangers of children being exposed to this so-called explicit content, I suggest you read banned books before allowing this politicized effort to tell you about what you don't yet know. Reading books like New Kid by Jerry Craft or Flamer by Mike Curato could open your eyes to a world unknown. And you'll find that book banning is illegitimate, but the moral panic overlooks it. And that's how my community reacted. I was sitting in my seat when every speaker received a roaring applause from the audience for seeking to ban books. When I was called to speak, my hands trembled, cold rushed through my body, my 3 minutes took place, and I walked back to my seat. I was only faced with dead silence and demeaning stares. I knew in that moment the reason why students don't engage in policymaking. But also in that moment, I found that the stares they gave me were stairs to climb on. I became the reason more students would engage that year with the district officials and press. We engaged with district officials and press, policymakers, community organizations on the front lines of this new movement for the freedom to read and learn. We distributed hundreds of banned books. We filed legal action with the ACLU. We dismantled the internet filter and packed school board meetings and drew national attention to the efforts led by students for students, reclaiming our education and changing the world with a legacy of compassion. I wish I had y'all in my school district whenever I was growing up. Months later, our momentum remained strong, and I co-founded Students Engaged in Advancing Texas, what we call SEAT, because students deserve a seat at the table in decisions affecting our everyday lives and our futures. Students are the primary stakeholders in our education, and we deserve that seat at the table. SEAT is an expansive network of students from across the state. We are normalizing the presence of students in educational policymaking. We strive for a day where students speaking at school board meetings is a norm, not an anomaly. Every news article about education or school policies should include students. Education-related legislation should involve students in the policymaking process. Grant making should include more student-led initiatives. These are the cultural shifts that we are driving so every student can hold agency in education. I'm so proud of SEAT organizers like Angel and Christiana, who are leading student-led programs like our statewide summit in Austin. I'm so proud of Emma for mobilizing her peers to demand comprehensive and affirming sex education in Fort Worth ISD. And students like Datavian, who are building bridges for bettering our nation with keynotes at national conferences like South by Southwest and with LeVar Burton. SEAT organizers like Jared have published op-eds in major publications like the Houston Chronicle and the School Library Journal. Ion is introducing anti-bullying legislation to Congress, and Hayden is building relationships with policymakers to advance the youth agenda, and the list goes on. We recently crafted a letter to clarify the duty of school districts to uphold Title IX non-discrimination protections for transgender youth. Look at all these organizations. We gathered signatures from more than 30 organizations like the Human Rights Campaign and GLAAD, as some school districts are rejecting federal civil rights law. We delivered our letter to more than 1,000 superintendents in Texas. We may seem unstoppable, but we've been fueled by mentorship and financial contributions of so many adult partners and organizations who believe in our mission to transform the policy landscape and bring power to the students affected by it. We could not have done this without this support, and we continue to face unprecedented challenges. This past year, Texas implemented a state law requiring school districts to vote on whether to allow chaplains to fulfill the duties of school counselors. Let me repeat that to let it sink in. Chaplains promoting one religion and uncertified by educator standards, not refrained from proselytizing, replacing school counselors. Texas and the nation is broadly diverse. More than 100 nationalities were represented at my school's annual culture festival. We need counselors who can support students from a variety of faiths. Learning our cultures and faiths can be a great way to reach students and better support us. And when it's beyond your expertise, because I'm not putting y'all up to the task of being an all-knowing poly-religious shaman, you can refer resources or faith leaders. I know I don't have to belabor to this crowd why replacing counselors with chaplains would be foolish, and most school districts saw eye to eye with us when they voted this spring after we mobilized students and faith leaders and communities across Texas. All 25 of the largest school districts in Texas rejected the proposal, but some others didn't. More recently, Louisiana became the first state to mandate 10 commandments in public school classrooms, because that was a whole other issue that we've been facing this year. There's an irresponsible effort intertwining nationalism and religion to harness political power. There's a concerted effort to advance legislation like this across the nation. State legislatures, including here in Missouri, have already proposed similar bills discussed and passed right now. It's happening in our backyards, whether we like it or not. It's tough enough being an educator or a counselor, and it's not incumbent on you to defend your profession, just like students shouldn't be obligated to stand up for our rights. But I feel we all have a moral obligation to start conversations, break silences and taboos, and bring people together understanding what it means to be a student or a counselor in today's America. We need a robust public education system that supports all students. Your school counseling can be a lifeline for students. You can help build those pathways, as many adults have done in my life, and countless students should be forever grateful. In school, many educators were sources of enthusiasm. The best teachers in my life didn't impose a narrow view of classroom leadership. They empowered me in how I best engaged with learning. They wouldn't scold me for reading a book when I finished an assignment or got ahead. They encouraged me to learn the Cameron way. I was very Cameron. There's no one way to be a student. We can all say that every person or every student is unique in our own ways, but do we educate that way? Do we make policy that way? Generation Z is incredibly diverse and progressive. According to the Pew Research Center, of young adults between the ages of 18 and 30, at least 22% identify as LGBTQ+. 22%. There's a whole lot of us in our schools, students, staff, you name it. Some of you may wonder, where are these queer people? Maybe some of you are those queer people. But, well, state legislators have proposed more than 700 anti-LGBTQ policies last year. Furthermore, school districts like in my hometown have adopted policies requiring educators to out transgender students to their families, many of whom would send them to conversion therapy or camps. States like Idaho have enacted new laws criminalizing librarians who check out LGBTQ books. Even further, states are suing to overturn the landmark 2020 Supreme Court decision, a United States Supreme Court ruling, holding that LGBTQ people are protected from discrimination on the basis of sex. Certain people want to legislate LGBTQ students out of existence, and policies like these harbor hostile environments for all students. No student finds home in school when educational institutions meant to support us embolden discrimination and inequity. These policies have real-world consequences, so many hide their authentic selves or are pushed out. Last summer, Katy ISD proposed a comprehensive anti-transgender policy. A school district of 90,000 students, and this was not just a single provision, but everything that you could imagine. For the first time since my senior year, I showed up to the school board workshop before the vote. When they released the policy in full, our worst expectations became real. It had nothing to do with education, but everything to do with identity. We spent 1 week, a single week, mobilizing the community, engaging the press, and assembling school lanyards with our Know Your Rights and Student Resource Hub. Walking into the boardroom a week later, I was awestruck. I was speechless. More than 400 people showed up, a drastic contrast to that very first time, and still even more than as we packed school board meetings my senior year. 400 people showed up. Not only did we fill every seat in the boardroom, but we filled an overflow room that never existed before. One after the other. We did it, y'all, because one after the other, students, parents, educators, you name it, were called up to speak for over 4 hours. The boardroom was exhilarating. In the overflow room, we showed up for each other. We played games, ordered pizzas for dinner, distributed 100 banned books, and exemplified the roller coaster of emotions that make us human. Teachers, counselors, and administrative staff showed up for us. They were asking for our rainbow heart stickers, seat lanyards, and lapel pins. District staff wore our pins on the dais to symbolize our seat at the table, while the school board was trying to legislate us out of existence. They showed up for us, and it was exactly what we needed. We stuck together until the very end, when the vote came only minutes before midnight. The now obviously flawed, rushed, and politicized policy passed by a 4-3 vote. The very next day, a student named Cadence walked into class, but this day was different. Peers and teachers know him by Cadence. But one teacher confronted him right away, pointed to his ID badge with his dead name, and told him they're using that name and gender now. To refuse to affirm a student's name, to require trans students to use a bathroom that could get them beaten up for their appearance, to empower discrimination is appalling. These policies are life or death for students. Students like Cadence deserve better when he and his family made the difficult decision to leave the district, a self-proclaimed high school dropout. Cadence deserves better. Students deserve better. This policy wasn't one and done. School districts are proposing copycat policies modeled after KDISD's. While mitigating impact, we are continuing to show up strong at these board meetings across Texas. We filed the complaint with the Department of Education, prompting a federal civil rights investigation into the policy. Students are powerful. We are the experts of our experiences in school. The youth are not just the future. We are the now. We are a foundation for the future and a cornerstone of democracy. We must not be written off. We can shape the future we wish to inherit by partnering intergenerationally. We have voices, and our voices are powerful, but we can't do it alone. Now, no matter what social media platform you're on, but especially Instagram, take out your phone and follow our movement. Visit our website at studentsengaged.org and join our email list. You can stay in touch about the work we're doing and join the movement. Movements rely on learning, sharing, and uniting with one another. I hope today you find the motivation to show up in the way that you can. And I know that you're already showing up because I can feel my phone buzzing right now. If you're already showing up, then how can you show up in another way? If you're struggling, how can you show up in the little or subtle ways that can make a big difference among this entire room? If we are to support all students, we must not forget the most vulnerable and unheard. We also must live and breathe the values that we share here in this room and other spaces. When we denounce injustice, we must denounce it everywhere. Our values shouldn't be compromised because of someone's skin color, faith, or nationality. Show up for LGBTQ students and denounce hateful rhetoric. We can show up for the children in Gaza and denounce American imperialism and colonialism. We can show up for the Jewish students like myself when we face anti-Semitism. And when we go back home to our communities, we can show up. Our response to injustice is our responsibility. Thank you all so much, and I'll see you in the movement.